Alright everyone, welcome back again to more Misericord Volume 2, White Wool and Snow. I believe Daylight Savings Time ended, or it began. I confused which one is which when you have to push the clock an hour forward. It just means that we lost an hour of sleep, but it doesn't mean we lose an hour of this wonderful game. We're going to continue on from where we last left off, so if anything else guys, hope you all continue to enjoy. Thank you again for all love and support. And here we go. Alright everyone, welcome back. We're still being interrogated by these two wonderful sisters who are incredibly curious and won't leave much alone. Give it a rest. You caught her mucking about with herself. It happens. I have to imagine that was the only entertainment she had in that cell in the first place. Probably brought back old memories, put her in a certain mood, you know? I despise how much sense that makes. I had no idea what they were talking about, but I had been granted a reprieve from the erroneous belief that I had been boffing, as Catherine put it, anybody. I was torn between relief and disgust. Any port in a storm? Was Catherine really suggesting? Was Margaret suggesting? I jumped to my feet so heated I was at the accusation. I wanted to quote Aquinas at the top of my lungs. How disorderly did those two think of me to suggest that I could do such a thing to myself? The pair of them looked at me quizzically as I held a finger forward, ready to spew venom in their direction at the very idea that I would do something so unnatural to myself. And then I realized the predicament I was in. You won't tell anyone, will you? I gulped. My hands were shaking. Margaret and Catherine grinned and looked at each other. Hedwig. What's to tell? We all do it. Right. We all do it. Catherine was just hoping she'd caught you doing something a little juicier. You make it sound so sinister. I was only curious. Of course. The game goes on, it would seem. So it would. Catherine gently reached out and pushed my arm down, making sure to hold me by the wrist. Be a dear. Wash your hands before coming to supper, would you? Well, of course, but... Ah! Catherine smirked. Well then, that's the end of that, I suppose. Let's go for a walk in the garden, Margaret. That sounds pleasant. Perhaps we can find someone else to bother. Margaret made for the cask-cum-tunnel. Oh my god. Be seeing you, Hedwig. Ta-ta. They both crawled somewhat awkwardly through the hole. I sighed deeply before following suit. They walked on ahead of me once we were in the cellars. I shut the cask door behind me and leaned against the barrels to catch my breath. How much of my innocence would I have to sacrifice for this quest the Superior had given me? Apparently all of it. I mean, at least, you know, no one really questions your actions at the moment. It had not been that long since I had left my cell. In that time, I had lied, stolen, cursed, and struck someone. But now, something new and unsettling was in the balance. My reputation. I wasn't sure I had many more pieces of myself I could break off and throw to the wolves to keep them at bay. What was left of me? To my sisters, I was beginning to look like a deranged and violent slut. I did my best to pull myself together before leaving the cellars. I thought about taking a bath, but nudity had gotten me in enough trouble today. Well, I mean, you taking a bath isn't an issue. It's you being nude anywhere else, apparently. I didn't want to risk being seen by prying eyes so soon after that nightmarish encounter. I looked down at the book I had taken from my old cell. I'd been interrupted in my last attempt to determine its purpose by this whole endeavor. I decided to head back to the dormitory and investigate it in peace. Darcy and Eustace were nowhere to be found. Whatever they had been arguing about, it had resolved. Or perhaps they had moved the conversation elsewhere. At any rate, I was relieved to be able to enter my room without being noticed. I closed the door and took a seat at the little writing desk situated across my bed. It wasn't as big or as sturdy as the one in my old cell, but I still felt a sense of comfort spreading an open book in front of me on the slanted surface. I procured a quill and an ink bottle. Nowhere near as nice as Moira's, but it'd do, from underneath the bench. I flipped through the pages one more time to confirm the book was truly empty, even propping open my window, while fully clothed, mind you, to hold the pages up to the light, just in case something had been scratched into the pages or some such trickery. Satisfied, I laid the book down again. This empty tome was indeed another question for me to answer, but that investigation would have to wait. While I was curious who had deposited a blank book in my cell and their reasoning for doing so, I decided to take advantage of the opportunity I'd been presented with. Notes. It was well beyond time for me to start taking notes. I could only hold so many mysteries in my head at once. If I had not been handed this book, I dare say the lie I told Catherine and Margaret about stealing a book from my library pile would have become true in a day or two's time anyway. My job was a chronicler, I reasoned. This was simply work I could do outside the library. Where to begin, though? A map? Hastily, I began jotting down a map of the Abbey, as best I could understand at any rate. I had no eye for scale, and in the process I realized I had a habit of mixing up my left and right more than I care to admit. Not to mention my cardinal directions. Had you noticed that? I apologize if it made things difficult for you. I found the process rather entertaining. I could feel myself growing calmer as well. Putting information on the page began to feel like taking it out of my head. When I finished with the little map, I began writing about the sisters. I mean, at the very least, you're now like making what you call not just headway, but you're making what you call a base, so you know where things are and where every other place is located in. Because from what she was talking about earlier, she was just saying that she was also fooling us. I don't even know. Did she say she was doing it on purpose? I think she was doing it on purpose too, to fool us here and there. I left the page blank for each, scribbling down a little more noter for each. Then, when I finished that, I turned to a fresh page and wrote Catherine. This would be my workbook. I felt more motivated to finish this investigation than ever before. The embarrassment of Catherine snooping aside, returning to my cell alone had felt good and correct. It was where I belonged, and the sooner I could put Catherine's murderer to justice, the sooner I could return. I wondered if any anchorite or anchoress had ever been blessed twice after breaking their vow, and if so, if they had found redemption. It was the best chance I had, I concluded. Maybe I would be the first, and maybe it would not save me. But at least God would see that I had tried. It would be better than nothing, and I would have some semblance of peace knowing I had helped Sister Catherine. I had been given a task by my superior, however misguided she might have been, and God had sent me a vision. Yo, that music is freaking me out. And what's more, I'd survived not one but 2 encounters with unholy agents of the devil. God was telling me to finish my work, whatever it took. The only problem was that even after exhausting everything I knew into the pages of my new notebook, I had no idea where to begin. I quickly shut the book and wheeled around, looking for a place to hide it. I felt that a lot less clever than I did a few minutes prior. Yes? Sister Hedwig, may I enter? Certainly. The door opened and Angela glided forward. She closed the door behind her and leaned against it. Superior would like the key back. Oh my goodness. Yes, of course. I rummaged around in my robe and my heart sank. Oh dear. I'm afraid I must have left it in the cell. Sister Hedwig, please tell me you're joking. I'm afraid not. I must have dropped it in the dark. Well, go and find it quickly, lest it fall into the wrong hands. Of course. I can't believe how clumsy I am sometimes. Nor can I. Did you find anything? I looked at her blankly. In the cell, the superior informed me of your hypothesis. Did you find anything indicating why Flora might have been hiding in there? Or why she was attacked? Not as such, no. Only, I weighed whether or not to tell Angela about the empty book left by the intruder. On the other hand, the less I could get away with talking to her, the better. On the other hand, I had no real reason to hide it from her if she'd eventually hear it from the superior anyway. There was a book waiting for me. An empty one. An empty book? Many of those traveled in and out of that cell, I thought. It wasn't one of your blank Bibles? No. A little smaller, and well, it was in the bed. And the superior and I had already visited the cell some time ago and it wasn't there. Angela arched an eyebrow. I had her intrigued. I decided that there was no real reason for me to hide the detail I had been talking around. Perhaps it might even impress her to know that I was able to think on my feet and avoid detection. I leaned forward, prompting Angela to do the same. To tell you the whole truth, someone else came into the cell while I was looking for clues. I only just managed to hide under the bed. Angela inhaled sharply. Who was it? Did you see them? Only in the hem of their robes, I'm afraid. And she said nothing. It could have been anyone. That is a pity. I wish I had gotten a good look at them. I was rather occupied. I was making sure they didn't get a good look at me. That is fair, I suppose. Well, we can rule out Flora, since she's confined to that wheelbarrow at present. I bristled at Angela's use of we. Could you tell if they were wide, heavyset? I think I could identify Sister Charity from such an extreme angle, at least. Yes, I suppose we can rule Charity out. And Sister Marta. Why is that? She walks with a cane. Ah, of course. And what'd you do with this book? Is it still there? I shook my head. No, I took it with me. I was hoping there'd be something inside, but it was entirely empty. I'm using it as a lock for myself now. Why would you do that? She hissed at me through gritted teeth. I was taken aback. I checked it thoroughly, and I've been in need of something to track my thoughts. Whoever left it there did it for a reason. Presumably, somebody else was meant to discover it. Now it's gone. I felt embarrassed. Angela was completely correct. I loathed admitting it to myself. How stupid was I? I could write it back right now. I was about to go retrieve the key as it was. No, it's far too late for that. You've already written in the book? Yes. Then it would be worse to give it back. She sighed and pinched the bridge of her nose between her thumb and forefinger. We can make this work for us. If this book is the key to some conspiracy, whoever is involved will know someone is in their trail when they realize it's missing. This is not ideal, but it won't be difficult to spot erratic behavior. You mean it'll be obvious something is wrong? It'll require a bit of snooping. You're capable of that, surely. Yes. I'll do my part as well. And speaking of erratic behavior, what were you doing with Catherine and Margaret earlier? Just ingratiating myself. I see. Conspiracy or no, you should not trust those two. You should not trust anyone, but especially not those two. What's particularly bad about them? Oh, nothing you need to worry about. I'm doing my best to put an end to their little scheme. Scheme? She looked me up and down. There was a surprising sheepishness in her tone. It didn't come up in your time with them today. It's nothing you need to concern yourself with. Just understand that I'm on your side. Everyone claims they're on my side. How am I supposed to trust you? How are you any different? I imagine Angela might gut me on the spot if I told her what did come up in my time with Catherine and Margaret, so I decided to leave things there. I'll take your word for it. You ought to run along and find that key. Don't keep the superior waiting. Of course. Holy crap, what if that key is taken? I hope it isn't. Angela stepped away from the door and passed through it, and I scurried after her in a hurry. As I breezed down the upper hall, I could see some of the elder sisters milling about in the cloister below. The wind had picked up that afternoon, and it carried a pleasant smell. Darcy must have been hard at work cooking dinner. I tracked to the side of the hallway closest to the wall, keen not to catch the attention of anyone below who might happen to look up and see me making my way toward the old cell for the third time in the day. I made it to— Ow, bit my tongue. I made it to a dark doorway and tested the door. It gave, unlocked just like I had left it. I slipped inside and checked the bed. No key. I dropped it to my hands and knees in an instant in a panic, rummaging around beneath the bed. Still, there was no key. I groaned aloud and adjusted myself to reach further back, praying that I'd simply knock the key into a distant corner when I hid it myself. Nothing. Aw, crap, man. If people thought you weren't onto them before, they now know. The cool stone sent shivers up my arm as I fumbled for the key, but I had more important things to worry about at that moment. I scrambled to my feet and paced around the room, hoping to see the key waiting for me somewhere on the floor of the desk. It was nowhere to be found. I grabbed my cowl and pulled it tight around my head and let out a quiet howl of frustration as I could. Defeated, I flounced onto the bed. The superior would be furious if I had lost her key. I began to wonder what exactly I would have to do to lose her trust completely. Was there something I could do that would be so stupid, so inept, as to prompt her to cut me loose entirely? I began to imagine a life away from the Abbey, cast out from my incompetence. How long would I last? What could I even bring myself to do? Perhaps I'd die in a gutter somewhere, unskilled and hungry. Or perhaps I'd be traded around staring men to be buffed, as Catherine put it. Or perhaps I'd try to make a real go of the situation and die slipping off a gangway on my way to begin a new life. Knowing myself, that seemed most likely. I stewed for a while, no longer thinking about finding the key and instead imagining more and more gruesome and sad scenarios in which I might find myself for having lost it. The wind had picked up even more speed all the while. The ominous hum was not helping me think things through. Supper would be soon. With a groan, I lifted myself off the bed and made for the door. I would have to face Angela and the superior's anger, no way around that. I just hoped that the spirit would take mercy upon me rather than confirming one of my wild fantasies. The wind really was quite loud. As I began to walk away from my cell, the sound grew louder, reaching a peak that reminded me all too well of the howling sounds I had heard that night I found Flora. And then my cloak moved. I stopped in my tracks. I'd barely noticed it, but there was no mistaking that feeling. I felt the hem of my robe brush against my stocking at a peculiar angle. I looked down, half expecting to see the accursed cat running between my legs, but there was nothing. Only the sound of the gale outside. I took a step back and my cloak moved again. I realized that it was a breeze. I frowned. There were no windows in this pitch-black passageway. Then I remembered something that turned my blood cold. That break in the wall that Margaret had shown me. I moved closer to the wall, barely able to make it out in the darkness. I felt around the stone of my fingers for whatever small handle Margaret had used before. Finally, I found it. A small divot in one of the bricks, just deep enough for 2 fingers and angled ever so slightly to provide something to pull. A passage! I yanked back, expecting the door to be heavy, and nearly fell onto my back as it swung open. The wind was coming through the passageway at a mighty force. Light danced around the small tunnel as well. A realization finally crept into my mind as I watched the shadows play on the wall. Flora hadn't only been hiding in my cell. She'd been spending time between the walls. But why? You know why, a voice inside of my head taunted. That magic circle. Against all better judgment, I slipped into the hidden passageway and began to sidle toward the corner Margaret had led me around. I had no candle this time, but there seemed to be enough light in here to see what I needed to see. If I could just get a second glimpse of the evil carving, perhaps I could identify what Flora had been doing here. My heart ached for her. What could have driven her to seek refuge in such wickedness? Excuse me. I turned the corner and gasped. The circle was gone. The wind whipped my cloak around me, making it difficult to move. The piece of wall that had held the carving was gone. Oh God, thank you God, I thought. I could have jumped for joy at the sight, although it brought me no closer to understanding what Flora had wanted with such a witchcraft, or who had carved it in the first place. I turned to leave, but a glint of light caught my eye as I moved. I looked down and noticed a small knife. It was held in place by a heavy brick that looked like it had fallen into this tight passage when the wall was destroyed. The blade was dulled, the tip practically rounded, almost as if... Oh, Flora. It had been dragged across stone. I lifted the rock and picked up the knife. I may not have been particularly intelligent, but even I could make the connection between the withered tool and the crude carving Margaret had shown me. As I made my way back to the dorms to hide this new clue, I turned new horrid thoughts over in my head. The ghost had been real. There was no doubt in my mind about it. I had smelled the sulfur and burning hair. I had seen its dead eyes. Flora had come running out of that passage pursued by the monster. A monster summoned by that spell? Which meant that Flora. It made me feel violently ill just thinking about it. So Flora was the one that made the circle. Why would Flora invite such evil into the Abbey? I knew enough about the poor girl to know that she had her moods, and I'd heard stories about her desire to escape. Beyond stories even, she had approached me with a plan in the Misericord, ready to steal from the church and make a new life with ill-gotten gains. Had I driven her to this? No, I think she was already doing this before you came into the picture. I felt faint. I had to remind myself that Flora's choices were hers alone, and if she had decided to unleash a violent spirit upon the Abbey as a form of revenge, well, that was wickedness on her part. It would have been her choice. Or, if I remember correctly, she did say that she was close with Catherine. And when Catherine died, I think she was upset about that, and she may have used the circle in hopes of casting a spell that would bring her back, but in fact invited evil. So, you know, it could be that too. Not mine. Not my fault. Not my fault. Flora's fault. Well, we need to confront Flora first. As I entered the dormitories, I was alarmed to see the girl in question. She was perched awkwardly in her wheelbarrow, chatting with Moira, who looked surprisingly frustrated. Probably say Paris. Achilles is a bit of plain. Oh, Hedwig, thank God. I mean, what a pleasant surprise. Oi, am I boring you? Not at all. Moira looked at me pleadingly. We've just been discussing La Commedia, and the Iliad, and history, and men, and... Sorry for going on. You could have just said something. I tried. You act like I've been talking about the same thing for hours. Those are all different topics. I suppose that's true. Given the opportunity, who would you take, Hedwig? Achilles or Paris? I haven't the faintest idea who or what either of those are, I'm afraid. Did you not have the Iliad or anything in your box? No, I did not. You only had the Bible? For 20 years? No. I had the Bible, a large collection of Summa Theologica incunables, a handful of other scholarly texts. I was trying to be as curt as possible. I could only stand to look at Flora, but I knew I had to keep up appearances until I could confirm things further. I held Flora's knife in my sleeve, hidden from view. God, that sounds boring. It was enough for me. The Bible would have been enough, in fact. I must admit, I do think some of Flora's favorites make for good reading, but I can only talk about them for so long. That's funny. Does everyone stop liking fun when they get old? I almost smiled as I saw Mario's grip on the wheelbarrow handles tighten. Hedwig and I are not that much older than you, Sister Flora. Yet the gap between us is massive. Although I suppose you're right, because these are all books Catherine gave me. She knew how to have fun. I'm sure she did. Put me in my room, would you? I could do with a quick kip before dinner. Moira obliged before Flora had even finished speaking. She spun the barrel around and into Flora's room. I think Catherine has volunteered to take care of you again next. Really? Excellent. I know she likes comedy. Moira smiled weakly and shut the door. I'm so glad she's alright. But you're not glad that you have to spend time with her, huh? As am I. Forgive me, Sister Moira. I came here with much the same intention as Flora. I really need to relax before supper. I've had a surprisingly long day. Oh, you poor thing. Is something wrong? You look worried. No, it'd be difficult to explain. I'm a good listener. As Flora can attest. She giggled, rolling her eyes. She walked with me to my dorm door. Yes, actually. Come in. I suppose it's too close to dinner for a real nap. I might sleep through the whole thing if I shut my eyes now. I'm the same way. When I sleep, I really sleep. I glanced over my shoulder at Flora's door. Moira, I pushed my door open and brought Moira inside. She sat on the bed before I could even invite her to. Honestly, I like Moira. She's been understanding so far. She's been really friendly and welcoming. But as Angela said, we cannot trust anyone. Even she could be a problem. I don't know. I hope you don't tell her, but you probably will. Has Flora been acting strangely? Oh, no. No stranger than you would expect somebody in her position to act, at least. It's just that I had no idea what a chatterbox she could be. I'm used to her being more withdrawn, but I suppose all that changes when you have to be helped around all day. Honestly, I wonder if this experience will do her some good. Not the leg, mind. Moira drew the sign of the cross across her body quickly. But you know, being forced to be a bit more sociable. I only hope I can measure up. Today was a bit trying. I see. She hasn't said anything odd? Odd? She says a lot of things I would describe as odd, but you sound like you mean something in particular. I don't know. Blasphemous? Unholy? I mean, no offense, Hedwig, but I think you might find most things she says disagreeable. She's young, and she's bored. Catherine left her an awful lot of strange books. They love talking about morbid tales and sweeping epics. I promise she's not said anything outside of the ordinary, though. Other than the sheer volume. I see. What's bothering you? Did she say something when you found her? Not as such. I don't know. Hedwig, what's wrong? I'm not sure I can talk about it. You can tell me anything. I won't blabber. Usually when they say this, they usually blabber. I don't know. Again, Moira is cool. She's actually one of the few characters I do like. But you never know. It's usually characters that you do like that may, betray you unexpectedly. I wish I could believe this. But I was well aware that I was rapidly being forced into positions of trust with far too many people. I wanted to ask Moira more. Tell her more. But between Angela and Eustace, I already had too many promises to break. It's nothing. I think I'm just a bit shattered by the whole thing. I am worried about her. We all are. You should be proud. It sounds like you found her in the nick of time. Poor Flora. All she wanted to do was go for a walk and then the blasted door blew shut. I can't stand it. I don't like having to be afraid of such mundane things. I know that this must be Flora's new story. It made as much sense as anything, I suppose. I frowned, remembering that I had told the superior the true story. Eustace barely believed it, and the superior certainly didn't. I wondered if the superior had told Angela my version. Yes, I suppose it's a good thing I heard her screaming. I'm surprised I didn't, but it was late, and I'm so used to the wind and rain these days I can sleep through anything. We could talk about something else if this is too dreary. Did you do anything fun with your day off? Oh, I helped Darcy clean the kitchens for a while. And then I did some writing. I winced. My mouth was faster than my mind. Writing? You were working on your holiday? Not too much, and I also spent a little time with Eustace and Darcy. Well, separately. Darcy was working on her brewing and needed some supervision. Moira giggled. I love your capacity for understatement. Yep, understatement indeed. And I went fishing with Eustace. Ooh, that explains why they were arguing earlier. Were they now? Oh yes. Don't worry, it happens all the time. Moira leaned forward, a mischievous smile on her lips. They're a regular married couple, you know. I mean, it's not my business really, but they're very close. They're good friends. I mean, everybody here has good friends, but those two are quite good friends. It makes it a little awkward when they're fighting. You have to pretend not to notice. What do they fight about? Hedwig, I'm a nice girl. I'm very good at pretending not to notice. And if I did notice, I would never share. I see. But between you and me, I do think Eustace can be a bit of a louse. In what sense? Oh, you know. They're both quite close, but Eustace can be a touch flighty. I went fishing with her today. Was that something she and Darcy usually do? I wasn't butting in, was I? Oh heavens no. I think Darcy tried fishing once and got the hook caught on her bottom. But I think Eustace tends to forget things she's promised Darcy she would do, or just not do them. Eustace is impulsive. I suppose Darcy can be impulsive too, but she keeps her word. I see. That does make some sense. I haven't the faintest idea what married couples are like, so when you said that... Oh, of course, I apologize. Silly me. It's quite alright. I felt somehow steered toward this next question, but I didn't really have an exit from this topic that wouldn't feel rude. So I asked anyway. Were you ever married? I wasn't particularly interested in knowing, but what else could I say? Me? No. I would have quite liked to have been, but I never found the right man. There was a boy when I was quite young. I thought I might quite like to marry him. But he died, and my family moved. It was a sudden thing, and honestly it doesn't bother me much thinking back on it. Just one of those little tragedies where you can remember the shape but not the feeling. I was too young to feel much, I think. And then by the time I was old enough to be truly courted, I was committed to joining an abbey. You felt a strong call to the church? I suppose so. I never had what you might call a religious experience, but when I looked around me and really took stock of the paths available to me in life, the church just seemed stable. When monks or nuns would come to the village, they came because they wanted to help people. It seemed so free of exhausting politicking. I know absolutely nothing about politics. That idea gives me a headache. Moira laughed. Life's complicated enough as it is, isn't it? My father's very political, or so my mother told me. He disappeared one day, and I learned that I wouldn't be able to follow in his footsteps. There was no family business to take care of, and aside from my looks, I had nothing to offer a husband. But if I took the veil, I could study up and really make something of myself. So that's what I did. That was, oh goodness, about 9 years ago now. I received word that my father had died the day I left to join the convent. I was sad, but I had seen so little of him I hardly wept. If anything, it made me feel like I had made the right decision. She looked a little glassy-eyed. I said nothing. Oh dear, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to bring the mood down so low. Not at all. Thank you for sharing. I'm afraid I don't have any stories like that to tell. I scarcely remember anything before the day I took my original oath. I know that I was born in Trier. I remember there was a river and that a lot of boats would come through. But my life began in that cell. Anything before that might as well have been the womb. You don't remember your parents? Your mother? Not in the slightest. It really is like nothing mattered until I was here. Anything before that cell door closed behind me, it doesn't feel real. That was something else. It all happened to somebody else. Goodness. Am I wrong to feel that way? Absolutely not. I understand exactly what you mean. It sounds liberating, to tell the truth. And well, it isn't so different from my experience. Both of us left different lives behind. We made a choice to serve something greater because it was the best option we had. I'm sure everyone here would agree. Well, perhaps not Flora. She giggled. Did the others serve something greater? Moira's face grew serious once more. Do you find us wanting, Sister Hedwig? I felt panicked. I was worried that I had seriously offended her. No, I'm making a joke. I'm joking. It's been a lot to take in. I've heard so many tales about what happens around here. Lust, death. Two constants in the world no matter where you go. Do you feel lust? Do I? Moira giggled. If I had offended her before, this new line of questioning had cheered her right up. No, that was rude of me. I shouldn't pry. I just wondered because you've been locked in a little room all by yourself. I know that if I were in that sort of position, I'd feel like a fox in a henhouse the minute I saw their people. I wouldn't know where to begin. I see your logic, but... No, I am tempted by many sins, but I am free of lust. Well, okay, you're... I would say you're kind of not, but at the same time, you really didn't do anything that was necessarily in relation to lust, but you did undress in your own cell, and you did lie down on the cool floors undressed. I don't know what you're trying to do, but that's something. But we could all learn a thing or two from you. She glanced out the window at the setting sun. It's probably time we went down for dinner, yes? Yes, of course. Moira beamed at me and stood up. She held the door open for me as we left. I still held the small knife tucked in my sleeve, and had seen no chances to hide it while Moira spoke. The others were making their way downstairs as well. Catherine was wheeling Flora out of her room, already looking slightly exasperated by whatever topic the younger woman was bombarding her with questions about. We made eye contact, and Catherine gave me a rueful grin. I attempted to return one, but my heart wasn't in it. The conversation with Moira had been pleasant in the end, but here in the hallway seeing Flora... all I could think was, why? Why had she endangered us all? The Life of the Virgin. Oh, I completed chapter 5. Midnight snack. Okay. Dinner was delicious as usual. Darcy had provided a veritable bounty of duck once again, and the vegetables from the garden were as wonderful as ever. Everything was slaughtered in a bit more gravy than I had gotten used to, though. I dared not ask why, as I didn't want to offend Darcy. Luckily, I did not have to. Superior, who had finally gotten dressed, I noticed, broached the topic for me. You have outdone yourself, Sister Darcy. Never would I have guessed we were about to enter winter with a meal this fresh. Thank you. It is all down to the sauce. I wasn't sure if the ingredients were at their best, so I gave the gravy a little extra attention. And used more of it. Apologies if anyone was expecting a wet meal. There was a murmur of reassurance. Everyone had enjoyed themselves thoroughly. It was fantastic, Darcy. I couldn't help but notice that Eustace was sitting on the opposite end of the table today and several seats away from what could be described as across from her friend. It's good to tuck in before winter. A few months of pottage and dried meats, I suppose it's always good for me in the end. I hate cooking during the cold months. Far fewer options. They're all cold months here. You know, it's funny, I always wondered why Darcy's dialogue was always all in lowercase. I wonder if Hedwig, the narrator, will explain that down the line. Flora had to be seated in the corner of the room with her legs sticking out somewhat awkwardly toward the table. Catherine sat on the stool next to her, helping spoon food into her mouth. Too true, Flora. You know what I mean. Charity's right. Lots of pottage for a while, I'm afraid. I'll do my best to get creative with the meats, but there is only so much to be done with salted beef. I love it, honestly. I'd eat dried foods all year round if I could. You do, don't you? Catherine called to Margaret from the side of the room. Unable to stomp her friend's foot in retaliation, Margaret grimaced and jerked her head towards the Superior. The Superior had not noticed Catherine's joke about midnight snacking habits, however. If she had, she did not care enough to chastise Margaret directly. We will all need to be responsible this winter. While I have ordered more supplies for the Abbey, we have an example to set for our new oblets. New oblets? Oh my heavens, what a surprise. Everyone started chattering at once until the Superior lifted a wary hand to quiet the room down. 2 new sisters will be joining us soon. They should be arriving in a week's time just before the snow will make travel impractical. How old are they? Yes, an important question. Around your age, actually, Sister Flora. A surprising cry of disappointment went up around the room. Behave. I expect you all to make them feel welcome. No hazing. No pranks. Etc., etc. The superior still seemed tired. I'd heard the same speech from her in the chapel on my first day out of my cell, but she had had far more vigor then. Is it too late to change their minds? I agree. I'll give it a rest. She stood up suddenly. If you'd all excuse me. She began piling up a plate with food, then made for the door. Superior, are you feeling well? I'm just fine, thank you, Moira. The bishop is feeling ill, and I must bring him his meal in his quarters, that is all. She left swiftly. Everyone in the room exchanged knowing glances. His quarters? Not subtle, is she? Behave. Now. Let's all be respectful. Is it disrespectful to point out the obvious? His quarters are her quarters. It's none of our business what those two are getting up to. She doesn't pry into what we got up to, does she? I wouldn't dare judge. Well, technically she is. Technically, because I'm her little spy. But it is a bit funny. He looks like a bit of a bore. A bore, more like. She flattered her nose to reveal her nostrils and made a revolting sound that nearly fell out of her wheelbarrow in a fit of giggles. That'll grow up, you lot. I don't understand. Nor should you. Come, Sister Hedwig. I must speak with you about something. Hedwig? Catherine shot me a steely look from across the table as I complied with Angela's request. I didn't particularly want to spend time with Sister Angela, but the atmosphere in the room was so awful I actually found the idea preferable. Very well, Sister Angela. I excused myself from the table and joined Angela, who had already made her way to the door. Everyone muttered disapprovingly as the door swung shut behind us. I followed Angela a little way to the garden until she was satisfied with our distance from the others. The key? I couldn't find it. Angela arched her eyebrow. For a moment, I considered showing her the knife I had retrieved. I did not want to push my luck, however. Angela had no interest in hearing any ghostly theories. But I'm gonna go back and look again. Maybe this works to our advantage, as well as just as you said. If we spot someone with the key... Angela suddenly gripped me by the shoulders. She did not shout, but she was terrifying all the same. I need you to take this seriously, Hedwig. A missing book? A wayward key? Lives could be at stake. Do you understand that? We could be in grave danger. 2 new oblates will be here soon. Is it fair for our house to be so out of order? Should they walk into the lion's den unawares? Surely the superior could turn them away if... And then what? Interrupt their service to Christ? Leave us to fumble around our own dark nightmare? This problem must be solved, Hedwig. It cannot be put off or left as is. We have a duty to God, our new oblates, and ourselves. I cannot fathom why the superior entrusted such a monumental responsibility to someone like you, but she did. Please rise to the occasion. For your own sake, if not everybody else's. Her fingers dug tightly into my flesh. Please. Yes, Sister Angela. I'm very sorry. Apologies are appreciated, but unhelpful. Actions, Hedwig. Actions will convince me you understand. I could apologize to the superior first and foremost. Listening to something so important. I would not worry her with this right now. You saw how she was in the refectory. I respect you for suggesting apologizing, but... Action. I nodded. I'd imagined plenty of punishments for myself before I had lost the key. I did not need to conjure up any more. Angela relinquished her grip and patted my shoulders in a way I assumed she thought would be reassuring and attempted to smooth out my wrinkled sleeves. Try to think. Where did you last see the key? Well, that was easy. I had used it to open the door to my cell. The only other place she could have lost the key was when she was desperate to run away from from Catherine. So she must have lost it in the hall? It could have fell off her pocket in the hall, if it's not in her room. It was more difficult than I expected, but once I was in the room, I had occupied myself for a few moments then. I was interrupted by an intruder and hid under the bed. But I had already checked underneath the bed. And on top of it, for that matter, for a split second, I panicked imagining that I could have flung it out the window by accident when Catherine had spotted me from below. But I had been holding the empty book that had been left on my mattress in both hands at that moment. The intruder. My stomach dropped. Was it that simple? I entered my cell, closed the door behind me, felt overcome by a need to touch the stone. I needed 2 hands to strip down. And when I no longer needed to hide, I've been distracted by the empty book and Captain's invasion of my solitude. The door had still been unlocked when I returned to search for the missing key before dinner, ergo, the intruder was the only remaining explanation. But the intruder would have locked the door, right? Even if she found the key. I mean, she would know that someone went in the room though, but that doesn't change the fact she would know. Unless she wants them to believe that she's unaware. But if she took the key, they would know too. I don't know. Or she's hoping, or the intruder is hoping that if she does have the key, she's hoping Hedwig, or whomever she believes came into the cell, lost it. Whoever it was who came into my cell while I was investigating it, she must have taken the key. A likely explanation if there was no key to be found in the cell prior to supper. So, who was it? I haven't the faintest idea. That is not true. I ruled out Charity and Marta for you, did I not? Yes. And it could not have been Flora. I saw Catherine outside while I was in my cell. Angela looked quizzical. I prayed she did not press for further details. That is curious. Nonetheless, I did see her and Margaret wandering away from the cloister around that time. So we can remove them from our list of suspects as well. Who else is unaccounted for? Eustace, Darcy? Well, I did walk past the dorms on the way to my cell and they seemed occupied by their conversation. We cannot rule either of them out entirely, but they did seem to be embroiled for the most of the afternoon. I suppose I haven't the faintest idea where Adela was. I can help you there. She was assisting Marta in the cellars. I know because I had just seen her when I came across Catherine and Margaret dragging you around by the scruff of your neck. I nodded to express my gratitude as vaguely as I could, not wanting to linger on the subject. And Marta was assisting Flora earlier today. And the wheelbarrow is rather squeaky, so it is. And the superior was occupied, indeed. But I furrowed my brow. I came out of my haze of thought to gulp at Angela, who looked almost as intense as the night she had menaced me with her dagger. That only leaves you. She slowly reached into the recess of her left sleeve, and for a moment I was worried I would see her blade flash again. But instead she produced the missing key. She held it in front of me between her thumb and forefinger. Yes, me. But the superior informed me of your plan to inspect the cell and asked if I would provide you with a notebook. By way of apology for how she had behaved earlier, she told me. When I arrived and could not find you, I thought I had perhaps gotten there before you. Or that you were too afraid to come at all. But why would you just leave the book there? Excuse me. Wow, I got something in my throat. Blech. Angela twitched her nose toward me, clearly tired of holding the key aloft in front of me. I obliged and took it from her. I was not lying when I advised against writing in a book. I think this is another one of our superior's ill-advised notions. I reasoned you would either find the book, and I would at least fulfill my role as a messenger, or you would never find it and therefore never use it. I could not resist the opportunity to teach you something. A lesson in either outcome. The corner of her mouth flicked upward. A cruel game. Excuse me. Ooh. I was terrified. I had lost the key. You did lose the key, Hedwig. Thank God it was me who found it. It took everything in my power to not strike her as I had struck Eustace. My whole body tensed for a moment, but I resisted the urge. I found Angela truly despicable in this moment. Honestly, I respect that. Because Hedwig does need to learn a little bit about being what she was assigned to be. And the best way to do that is to be more of a diligent sleuth. And Angela helped her with that just now. At least a little bit. A waste of my time. Was it? You did in fact lose this. You have learned to be more careful, I should hope. And perhaps you will think twice about further use of that book. Losing a key is one thing. Imagine what would happen if you wrote all of your secrets, all of your investigations into a little book that anyone could read. The spirit thought she was being very kind, I'm sure. But her kindness clouds her judgment. We stood in silence for a moment, eyeing each other. In the distance, I could hear the sound of the rectory doors opening and cheerful voices spilling out into the night. What will you do tomorrow, Hedwig? Your holiday's almost over. I will endeavor to find Catherine's killer. And the day after that, I will continue to do the same. Say it. I will endeavor to find Catherine's killer. And the day after that, I will endeavor to find Catherine's killer. Once more. I will endeavor. My throat was dry, and I had to swallow to get the rest out. To find Catherine's killer. Angela stood for a moment in contemplation, looking me up and down. Very good. I shall endeavor to do the same. Have a good night, Hedwig. You know, as much as I hate Angela, she may be the only ally you do have. At the moment. She turned to stalk behind the rest of the sisters as they walked toward the dorms. I followed behind her, wishing for all the world that I had a spear I could hurl into the back of her head. Well, at least if Angela's murdered, we'd know who it is. Angela eventually skulked away toward the superior's office. I went to the other direction. I could hear voices up ahead. While I didn't feel particularly sociable, I welcomed the chance to speak to anyone who wasn't Angela. Moira and Eustace were chattering animatedly up ahead. At first, I thought they might have been arguing. When they turned to me, however, they looked perfectly pleasant. Hiya, Hedwig. I was just telling Moira about our little fish fry-up. Oh, I so wish I could join. Unfortunately, I have so much to do this evening. And wouldn't you know it, I already committed to spending the evening in the Misericord. I shame to miss out on fresh fish, but I understand. Perhaps next time. Indeed. That's a good reminder I should go and offer the chance to the others before everyone commits to the Misericord. See you soon. Eustace left. Oh, by the way, Hedwig, could you remind me how one gets to your old cell? Oh, of course, but why? Oh, the spirit wanted me to double check that it's locked. I took the stairs across the cloister, but I couldn't find the hallway. It had not been long after I left my cell. I had been worried that a strange figure had been watching over me and launched myself up the stairs. I never navigated to myself in that direction. I always take the long way around, I suppose. Well, that's easiest. This place isn't half a maze sometimes. Indeed. Sister Moira. Sister Hedwig. Angela was done chatting with the superior then. She marched past us. Our eyes met briefly. She had nothing but I felt judged all the same. Goodness. Somebody's in a mood. We turned to follow her toward the stairs up toward the dorms. Voices echoed down the stairwell. The rest of the sisters were milling about at the top of the stairs, between the Misericord and library doors, talking animatedly. When I arrived, Catherine had just finished pulling Flora's wheelbarrow backward over the top step onto the landing. Evidently, getting the poor girl upstairs had proven to be a bit of a challenge. Took you long enough. You're welcome, Flora. Angela brushed past everyone and disappeared into the dormitories. Right then. Who are we having in the Misericord tonight? Catherine practically jumped forward. Yes, please. I need it too. What a day. Me too. I don't think so, Flora. You need to rest. Flora made a sour face but said nothing. I'll join you if you're going to be there, Charity. Of course. So that's me, Catherine, Margaret, Marta. Who else? Adela? I think not. Moira? Yes, please. I already said I would. I'll be there as soon as I can. Got lots to do. Room for one more. A night in the Misericord might be restorative, provided Eustace wasn't planning to scare me again. Plus, I hadn't had much of a chance to speak to Charity lately. I felt somewhat guilty volunteering for potential bacchanalia just after I'd affirmed my intent to find Catherine's killer. Perhaps I was just making excuses for myself. I would like to think I was making the decision for the right reasons. At any rate, it didn't matter. We had plans. I could hear snickering. Oh? Yes. We went fishing earlier and we're going to have an outdoor fry-up. Crumbs, I'm a bit jealous. You just ate. We'll wait a bit, obviously. Well, if everyone else is spoken for, I suppose Flora could join in. As long as she promises to behave. Really? I promise. The group split apart, the Misericord goers huddling together outside the door, presumably to plan out whatever activities and treats they would indulge in. Excuse me. Or I thought to myself as I wandered toward the dormitory, they could be discussing how relieved they were that I would not be attending. There would, after all, be no chance that I would attack any of them. I grimaced as I entered my room. I was feeling altogether exhausted. Fighting back tears of frustration, I set about hiding the dull knife I had found in the willows of my pillowcase. I was joining the triangular strip of fabric I had found snagged on a tree some time ago. And then there was the soiled copy of Matthew hiding under my bed. I sighed. I was gathering quite a collection of clues I was too stupid to make sense of. While I was at the very least relieved that I would not have to explain a missing key to the Superior, Angela had still run me ragged for a day with her little test. Angela and the Superior were demanding action from me, and Eustace was demanding stillness. I agreed with the ones who wanted me to press forward. Truth be told, I had made up my mind to push onward, to find the guilty party and clean up this whole mess and save this wicked place. But the ones who were supposedly my allies in this endeavor were strict, harsh, cruel even. Meanwhile, Eustace, who was petitioning for me to let all this go, was going to cook for me. She had corralled me into it, to be sure. Her invitation had really been more of a polite demand. She wanted to observe me. And I still don't trust her to this day. I was not stupid. At least, not that stupid. What ate at me was how much I preferred her approach. As sure as I was that I would ultimately have to betray her wishes, I was still looking forward to her company far more than I was to report to Superior or Angela about the investigation. It made me feel foolish. Worse, it made me feel craven. Was I really such a simple creature? I punched my pillows in frustration and broke down into the quietest sobs I could.
When you want to get off that darkest ground, but gravity pulls you straight down.